The red warning lights flashed across the engine room walls like angry eyes. Li Jiwan wiped sweat from his forehead as he stared at the main display screen. The numbers were all wrong. Very wrong. The quantum drive core was dying, and it was dying fast. Jiwan had been working alone in the deep parts of the ship when the alarm started screaming. He was the only human on the Stellar Harmony, a massive cargo ship that carried goods between star systems. The rest of the crew were aliens from different worlds, and they all thought humans were good at fixing broken things. Today, they were about to find out just how wrong they could be. The ship shook as another power surge ran through the quantum core. Jiwan grabbed the nearest wall to keep from falling. His tools scattered across the metal floor, making sharp noises in the loud engine room. The drive core was the heart of the ship. Without it, they would be stuck in the void between, the empty, dangerous space between star systems where no rescue ships could reach them. Jiwan. The voice came through his communication device. It was Captain Kang Mirai, the ship's leader. She was a Centauri, tall and thin with blue-gray skin and 4 arms. Her voice always sounded cold, like ice water. "Get to the bridge now. We have a problem." Jiwan looked at the warning lights one more time. The quantum core had maybe 6 hours left before it would explode and kill everyone on the ship. He picked up his tools and ran through the narrow hallways toward the bridge. The bridge was at the top of the ship, where all the important controls were kept. When Jiwan arrived, he saw the entire crew waiting for him. Captain Mirai stood in the center, her 4 arms crossed. Her large black eyes stared at him like he was something she had found on the bottom of her shoe. To her left stood Park Do-yun, the chief science officer. He was a Valkyrie, with green skin and a large head full of wrinkles. The Valkyrie thought they were the smartest beings in the galaxy. Do-hyun always looked at Jiwan like he was a stupid child. On the right was Kim Yuna, the security chief. She was a Thrakari, built like a mountain of muscles and covered in thick, dark fur. The Thrakari were warriors who solved problems by fighting them. Yuna's hand rested on the weapon at her side, and her yellow eyes watched Jiwan with interest. Near the communication controls sat Han Taemin, a small Gosari with soft pink skin and large, worried eyes. The Gosari were nervous creatures who scared easily. Taemin was shaking as he looked at his screens. "The quantum drive is failing," Captain Mirai said without any greeting. "You need to fix it." Jiwan blinked. "Fix it?" "Captain, the quantum core is having a cascade failure." "That means—" "I don't care what it means," Mirai interrupted. Her voice was sharp like a knife. "You're the engineer. Fix it." "But Captain, you don't understand. A cascade failure isn't something one person can fix. We need at least 12 specialists working together. We need special tools, replacement parts, and time. Lots of time. Maybe 3 weeks if we're lucky." Park Do-hyun made a sound like a laugh, but it wasn't friendly. "Humans always make excuses. Your people are famous for fixing impossible things. That's why we hired you." "This isn't impossible," Jiwan said, trying to stay calm. "It's just impossible for one person to do alone. The math doesn't work. Even if I had all the right parts, which I don't, the radiation levels in the core chamber would kill me before I could finish the first repair." Kim Yuna stepped forward. Her large hand moved to her weapon. "Are you saying you won't try?" "I'm saying it can't be done," Jiwan replied. "Not by one person. Not in the time we have left." Captain Mirai's 4 arms spread wide in anger. "Then we're all dead because of your failure." "My failure?" Jiwan felt his own anger rising. "I didn't break the quantum core. I've been telling you for months that it needed a full maintenance check. You said it was too expensive." "Enough." Mirai's voice echoed through the bridge. "You will go to the engine room. You will fix the core. That is an order." Jiwan looked around at the alien faces staring at him. None of them looked worried about dying. They looked angry at him like this was all his fault. Something felt wrong about this whole situation, but he couldn't figure out what it was. "How long do we have?" he asked. Taemin checked his screens with shaking hands. 5 hours and 43 minutes until core breach." "And how long until someone can rescue us?" "No one will come," Mirai said coldly. "We're in the void between. Rescue ships don't come here." Jiwan felt a cold fear in his stomach. They were going to die out here, and the crew was blaming him for it. But something in their eyes made him think they weren't as scared as they should be. Captain Mirai looked almost calm, and Park Do-hyun kept checking something on his personal device. "I'll need access to all the ship's systems," Jiwan said. "Emergency power, backup supplies, everything." "You'll have what you need," Mirai replied quickly. Too quickly, and I'll need help. Even if I can't fix it completely, maybe we can slow down the failure long enough for— No, Kim Yuna said firmly. You work alone. We have our own duties to prepare for. What might happen? Jiwon stared at her. What duties? That's not your concern, Captain Mirai said. Go to the engine room. Start working. Report your progress every hour. As Jiwon turned to leave, he heard Park Do-hyun whisper something to Taemin in their alien language. He couldn't understand the words, but he heard one thing clearly. They were talking about time. About how much time something would take, but they weren't talking about fixing the quantum core. Walking back through the hallways, Jiwon felt like the walls were closing in on him. The warning lights kept flashing, and the ship kept shaking as the quantum core got worse. But the more he thought about the crew's behavior, the more wrong everything seemed. Why weren't they more scared? Why did they want him to work alone? And why did Captain Mirai look almost happy when she sent him away? Jiwon reached the engine room and stared at the quantum core chamber. The radiation levels were already too high for safe work. In a few hours, they would be deadly. Even with a full protective suit, no one could survive in there long enough to make the repairs needed. The crew knew this. They had to know this, so why were they sending him to die? Jiwon sat down at his workstation and started checking the ship's systems. As he dug deeper into the computer files, he began to find things that made his blood run cold. Files that shouldn't exist. Plans that made no sense, unless the crew wasn't planning to die with the ship at all. Jiwon's hands shook as he stared at the computer screen. The files he had found made him feel sick to his stomach. Hidden deep in the ship's maintenance records were power routing plans that shouldn't exist. Someone had been secretly moving emergency power and life support systems away from the main ship. They were all being moved to the bridge section. He clicked through more files, his heart beating faster with each new discovery. The bridge section had been quietly turned into a survival pod over the past few months. Extra air recyclers, emergency food supplies, and independent power systems had all been installed without his knowledge. The crew wasn't planning to die with the ship. They were planning to survive in the bridge section while he died trying to fix the impossible. Jiwon leaned back in his chair, feeling dizzy. This couldn't be real. Even aliens wouldn't be this cruel, would they? He opened another file and found something that made everything worse. It was a personnel record for someone named Oh Sumin, another human engineer who had worked on this ship before Jiwon arrived. According to the official records, Sumin had died heroically trying to save the ship from a quantum core failure. But these hidden files told a different story. Jiwon's fingers moved across the keyboard, opening file after file. What he found made him want to scream. Oh Sumin hadn't died in an accident. The crew had sent him to fix an impossible problem, just like they were doing to Jiwon now. Sumin had discovered their plan too, but too late to save himself. There were insurance documents. Lots of them. The crew had taken out massive life insurance policies on Sumin, and they had collected millions of credits when he died. The insurance company paid out huge amounts when human engineers died heroically, trying to save alien crews. Jiwon found more names in the deeper files. Human engineers who had worked on other ships with the same crew members. All dead, all killed while trying to fix impossible problems. All worth more money dead than alive. He was looking at the records of a murder gang. The ship shook again and the warning alarms got louder. The quantum core was getting worse, but Jiwon couldn't focus on that now. He had to find a way to survive because he finally understood what was really happening. Captain Mirai and her crew were professional killers. They hired human engineers, put them in impossible situations, and collected insurance money when they died. The human reputation for fixing impossible problems made them perfect victims. Who would question a human engineer dying heroically in space? Jiwon heard footsteps in the hallway outside the engine room. He quickly closed the files and pretended to work on the quantum core diagnostics. The door opened and Park Do-hyun walked in with his usual smug expression. How is the repair going? Do-hyun asked, but his tone said he didn't really care. It's complicated, Jiwon replied, not looking up from his work. The cascade failure is worse than I thought. Do-hyun walked around the room looking at the equipment. You know, it's funny. We've had 3 human engineers on this ship over the years. All very talented. All died trying to save us from similar problems. Jiwon's blood felt like ice water. 3? Oh yes. Sumin was the most recent before you. Such a brave little human. He worked for 18 hours straight trying to fix a quantum core failure just like this one. The radiation killed him, of course, but he died trying to save us all. Do-hyun was enjoying this. Ji-won could hear it in his voice. Before Suman, there was another human named Kim Dae-ho. Engine failure in the Zeta sector. And before him was Lee Min-ji. Plasma reactor explosion near the Orion belt. The alien scientist walked closer to Ji-won's workstation. It's strange how these dangerous accidents keep happening when we have human engineers. But humans are so dedicated, aren't they? They never give up even when the situation is hopeless. Ji-won forced himself to keep working and not show any emotion. I guess humans are stubborn that way. Indeed. We've learned so much about human nature from working with your kind. Did you know that humans will work themselves to death rather than admit defeat? It's quite admirable, really. Do-hyun picked up one of Ji-won's tools and examined it. Of course, their deaths aren't meaningless. The insurance companies pay very well for fallen heroes. Enough to keep a crew comfortable for years. The alien was confessing everything right there in the engine room. He was so confident that Ji-won would die that he didn't care about being careful anymore. The insurance companies love human engineer stories. Do-hyun continued. Brave humans dying to save alien crews. It makes wonderful publicity for interspecies cooperation. Everyone wins. Everyone except the human, Ji-won said quietly. Well, yes, but humans seem to like dying for others. It's what your species does best. Do-hyun put the tool down and walked toward the door. Keep working, little human. We're all counting on you to do your duty. After the alien left, Ji-won sat in the engine room for several minutes, trying to control his anger and fear. The crew wasn't even hiding their plan anymore. They thought he was trapped with no choice but to die for their profit, but Ji-won had no intention of dying for anyone's profit. He opened the ship's layout, files, and started studying every section of the vessel. There had to be another way out. The crew had disabled most of the escape pods. He had found that in the maintenance records. But ships this big always had backup systems and forgotten storage areas. After an hour of searching, he found what he was looking for. Cargo Bay 7, in the lower section of the ship, had an old emergency escape pod that wasn't connected to the main computer system. According to the records, it had been installed years ago, and then forgotten when newer pods were added to other sections. The crew probably didn't even know it existed. Ji-won started planning. The escape pod would be basic, maybe only enough life support for 3 days. But he was an engineer. If anyone could make it work longer, it would be him. He checked the ship's communication systems and found another useful discovery. The crew thought they were cutting him off from outside contact, but they had forgotten about the emergency backup transmitters in the cargo bays. If he could reach one of those, he could send messages to other ships, but not distress calls asking for rescue, something much better than that. As Ji-won worked on his escape plan, he could hear the crew talking over the ship's internal communication system. They thought he couldn't hear them, but the engine room had access to all the ship's channels. Captain Mirai was already recording her official log about the tragic loss of their brave human engineer. Kim Yuna was making jokes about how long he would last in the radiation. Han Taemin was nervously asking about their own escape plan. They were betting on when he would die. The ship shook again, harder this time. The quantum core was getting closer to complete failure. Ji-won had maybe 4 hours left before the whole ship exploded. 4 hours to get to Cargo Bay 7, prepare the escape pod, and get away before the crew realized what was happening. 4 hours to turn the tables on a gang of alien murderers who thought humans were easy victims. Ji-won smiled for the first time in hours. The crew was about to learn something important about humans that wasn't in their insurance files. Humans didn't just die heroically. Sometimes they survived to tell the story. Ji-won moved through the ship's lower levels like a ghost. He had spent months learning every hallway and maintenance tunnel, and now that knowledge was saving his life. The crew thought he was still in the engine room, working desperately to fix their impossible problem. Instead, he was 3 levels down, carrying a bag full of tools and spare parts toward Cargo Bay 7. The ship continued to shake as the quantum core got worse. Emergency lights flashed in the hallways, and the computer kept announcing warnings that nobody was listening to. Ji-won had maybe 3 hours left before the core exploded and took the whole ship with it. He reached Cargo Bay 7 and found exactly what he was hoping for. The old escape pod sat in the corner like a forgotten toy. It was small, basic, and looked like it hadn't been used in years. But it was real, and it wasn't connected to the main computer system that the crew was watching. Ji-won opened the pod's door and looked inside. It was worse than he had hoped. The life support system was ancient. The power cells were nearly dead, and there wasn't much room for supplies. According to the labels, it had enough air and power for maybe 72 hours. Not nearly enough time for a rescue ship to find him in the void between. But Ji-won was an engineer, and engineers solved problems. He spent the next hour taking apart everything useful in the cargo bay. There were spare oxygen tanks meant for emergency repairs, environmental suits with their own power sources, communication equipment for cargo loading operations. Even some of the cargo containers themselves had useful parts. The escape pod was designed for one person to survive for 3 days. Ji-won was going to make it work for much longer. He connected the spare oxygen tanks to the pod's life support system, giving himself weeks of breathable air instead of hours. The environmental suits had small power cells that he could wire into the pod's electrical system. The communication equipment from the cargo bay was better than anything built into the old pod. As he worked, Ji-won could hear the crew talking over the ship's communication system. They were getting impatient. How much longer is the human going to take? That was Kim Yuna's voice, sounding annoyed. Not much longer, replied Captain Mirai. The radiation levels in the engine room are getting dangerous. He'll be dead soon whether he fixes the core or not. Should we check on him? Asked Han Taemin nervously. No need, said Park Do-yeon. Let him work in peace. It's more dramatic for the insurance report if he dies alone. Trying to save us all. They were laughing about his death while he worked to survive. Ji-won finished connecting the oxygen tanks and started working on the power systems. The escape pod's engines were tiny, only meant to get away from a dying ship and wait for rescue. But Ji-won had found something interesting in the cargo bay's inventory records. Some of the cargo containers held rare metals and advanced electronics. Expensive stuff that needed special handling. The containers had their own power systems and navigation equipment to keep the cargo safe during transport. Ji-won broke into 3 of the containers and found exactly what he needed. Advanced power cells, navigation computers, and even a small communication array that was better than most starships carried. He spent another hour carefully removing the valuable equipment and installing it in his escape pod. The pod's computer system was old and simple, but Ji-won was able to connect the new equipment without too much trouble. When he was finished, his little escape pod had more computing power and communication range than some military scouts. But the most important thing was the navigation system. The advanced computers could calculate jump routes and safe paths through the void between. Instead of drifting helplessly and waiting for rescue, Ji-won would be able to fly to safety on his own. The ship shook again, harder than before. Ji-won checked his timer. He had less than 2 hours before the quantum core exploded. Time to go. He climbed into the escape pod and started the launch sequence. The old systems came online slowly, but everything seemed to be working. The extra oxygen tanks were connected properly. The new power cells were providing steady energy. The communication array was ready to send messages across the galaxy. But before he launched, Ji-won had one more job to do. He accessed the ship's main computer through the cargo bay's terminals and started copying files. All the evidence of the crew's insurance fraud scheme. Records of the previous human engineers who had been murdered. Financial documents showing how much money the crew had made from killing humans. Everything he would need to make sure justice was served. The files finished. Copying just as the quantum core entered its final failure stage. Alarms screamed throughout the ship, and Ji-won could hear the crew shouting orders at each other over the communication system. Where is the human? Captain Mirai's voice was sharp with panic. He should be reporting his progress. The engine room sensors show massive radiation leakage, reported Taemin. He's probably dead already. Good, said Kim Yuna. Now we can activate our escape protocol. Ji-won smiled grimly as he listened to them. They were about to discover that their escape protocol had a few problems they hadn't planned for. He launched the escape pod just as the crew began their own escape sequence. The pod shot out of Cargo Bay 7 like a bullet, its small engines pushing it away from the dying starship as fast as possible. Through the pod's small window, Ji-won could see the stellar harmony getting smaller behind him. Emergency lights flashed all over the ship's hull, and he could see small explosions starting near the engine section. The ship was dying, just like the crew had planned. But they had made one big mistake in their calculations. Ji-won opened a communication channel and started broadcasting on all emergency frequencies. But he wasn't sending a distress call asking for rescue. He was sending a detailed report about 4 alien murderers who were about to try escaping from their latest crime. The message included their names, their locations, their ship's identification codes, and complete evidence of their insurance fraud scheme. He also included the exact coordinates where their escape bridge would be floating after the ship exploded. Most importantly, he included recordings of their conversations where they confessed to killing human engineers for profit. The message went out on emergency channels that reached across multiple star systems. Military ships, police vessels, rescue teams, and bounty hunters would all receive it within hours. Behind him, the stellar harmony exploded in a brilliant flash of light as the quantum core finally failed. The blast lit up the darkness of the void between like a small star being born. Ji-won watched the explosion through his pod's rear camera and saw something that made him smile. A small section of the ship's bridge had separated just before the explosion, exactly like the crew had planned. Their makeshift escape pod was intact and drifting in space, with 4 alien murderers inside who thought they had gotten away with their latest crime. They had no idea that human rescue ships were already on their way. But they weren't coming to rescue the aliens, they were coming to arrest them. Ji-won set course for the nearest human colony and settled back in his pilot seat. His little escape pod had enough supplies to keep him alive for weeks, and the navigation computer had found a safe route through the void between. He was going to survive this, and Captain Mireille and her crew were going to pay for every human engineer they had murdered. 3 days after the explosion, Ji-won's escape pod was still flying through the dark space between stars when his communication array picked up incoming signals. Multiple ships were approaching his location and they were moving fast. Human ships. The first vessel to reach him was a sleek patrol cruiser with the markings of the Terran Rescue Division. As it came alongside his tiny pod, Ji-won could see the name painted on its hull: TRS Vigilance. "This is Captain Yu Jonghan of the Terran Rescue Division," came a voice over the communication channel. "Are you Lee Ji-won, the engineer from the Stellar Harmony?" "Yes, sir," Ji-won replied, feeling relief wash over him. "I'm alive and my pod is stable. Thank you for your detailed message, Engineer Lee. We've been tracking you since you launched. Prepare for docking. We're bringing you aboard." As the rescue ship carefully grabbed his escape pod with mechanical arms, Ji-won saw other ships arriving in the area. Military vessels, police cruisers, and even some ships he didn't recognize. Word of his message had spread quickly through human space. The docking bay doors opened and Ji-won found himself face to face with Captain Yu, a middle-aged human with kind eyes and a serious expression. Behind him stood several other crew members, including a woman in Admiral's uniform. "Engineer Lee," said the woman, stepping forward. "I'm Admiral Bae Soo-jin, commander of the Terran Rescue Division. Your message has caused quite a stir across the galaxy." Ji-won climbed out of his pod, his legs shaky after 3 days in the cramped space. "Admiral, I have evidence that Captain Mireille and her crew have been murdering human engineers for insurance money." "They tried to kill me too." "We know," Admiral Bae replied grimly. "Your message included enough evidence to arrest them 10 times over. But first, we need to find them." Captain Yu gestured toward the ship's bridge. "They're still alive, floating in their escape pod about 50,000 kilometers from here. They think they're waiting for an alien rescue ship to pick them up. But instead, they're going to get us," added Admiral Bae with a cold smile. As they walked through the ship's corridors, Ji-won met more members of the investigation team. Dr. Cho Hyun-woo was a forensic expert who specialized in space disasters and insurance fraud. He had been studying the evidence from Ji-won's message and was excited to meet the engineer who had escaped the murder plot. "What you did was brilliant," Dr. Cho said as they entered a conference room. "Escaping was only part of it. The way you documented everything and transmitted the evidence, that's what's going to put these criminals away forever." Admiral Bae activated a large display screen that showed the area around the destroyed Stellar Harmony. A small blinking dot marked the location of the alien crew's escape pod. "They've been sending distress calls for 3 days, she explained. "But the only ships responding are human vessels. They don't know that yet. On the screen, Ji-won could see at least a dozen human ships surrounding the area. Military cruisers, police vessels, and investigative ships had all converged on the location. It was the largest law enforcement operation in this part of the galaxy in years. What happens now? Ji-won asked. Now we arrest 4 alien murderers and make sure this never happens to another human engineer, Admiral Bay replied. But first we want them to incriminate themselves a little more, Captain Yu explained the plan. The crew of the Vigilance had been monitoring the aliens' communications for the past day. Captain Mirai and her crew were still pretending that Ji-won had died heroically trying to save the ship. They had even been practicing their story for when they were rescued. They have no idea that you survived, Captain Yu said. When we reveal that you're alive and have evidence of their crimes, their reaction is going to be recorded and broadcast across the galaxy. Dr. Cho pulled up files on his computer. We've also been investigating their past crimes. The 3 human engineers they killed before you. We found evidence of the same insurance fraud scheme going back 5 years. They've stolen millions of credits and killed innocent people. Ji-won felt angry all over again thinking about Oh-Suman and the other engineers who had died. They were bragging about it. They told me that humans like to die for others like it was some kind of joke. Well, they're about to learn that humans also like to see justice done, Admiral Bay said firmly. The plan was simple but effective. Captain Yu would approach the alien escape pod in the Vigilance, pretending to be a random patrol ship that had detected their distress signal. The aliens would tell their prepared story about the heroic human engineer who died saving them. Then Ji-won would reveal himself, alive and with evidence of their crimes. Everything would be recorded and transmitted live to news networks across the galaxy. As the Vigilance approached the alien escape pod, Ji-won sat in the ship's communications center with Admiral Bay and Dr. Cho. They could hear Captain Mirai's voice over the radio, weak and desperate sounding. This is Captain Kang Mirai of the cargo vessel Stellar Harmony, she was saying. We've been stranded for 3 days after a quantum core failure. Our human engineer died trying to save the ship. We are the only survivors, Captain Yu responded in a professional voice. This is Captain Yu of the patrol ship Vigilance. We're here to help. Prepare for rescue docking. Thank you, Mirai replied, and Ji-won could hear relief in her voice. We thought we were going to die out here. As the docking procedure began, Admiral Bay activated recording systems throughout the ship. News networks across human space were already broadcasting live coverage of the rescue operation, though they didn't know the whole story yet. Ready? Admiral Bay asked Ji-won. He nodded. Let's show the galaxy what really happened. The alien crew was brought aboard the Vigilance and escorted to the main conference room. Captain Mirai looked exactly like Ji-won remembered, tall, thin, with 4 arms and cold black eyes. Park Do-hyun still had his smug expression. Kim Yuna's hand rested near her weapon even though she was unarmed. Han Taemin looked nervous and confused. They had no idea they were walking into a trap. Captain Yu began the interview in a gentle, professional manner. Can you tell us what happened to your ship? Captain Mirai launched into her prepared story. The brave human engineer. The impossible repair job. The heroic sacrifice. She even managed to make her voice sound sad as she described Ji-won's death. He worked for 18 hours straight, she said, wiping fake tears from her eyes. The radiation was killing him, but he wouldn't give up. Lee Ji-won died a hero trying to save us all. Park Do-hyun nodded sadly. Humans are so dedicated. He could have escaped with us, but he chose to stay and try to fix the quantum core. We owe our lives to his sacrifice. Kim Yuna added, we tried to convince him to abandon the repair and escape with us, but he refused. He said it was his duty to save the ship. Admiral Bay looked at Ji-won and smiled. That's a very touching story. But I think Engineer Lee might have a different version of events. Ji-won stood up and walked into the conference room. The look on Captain Mirai's face was worth everything he had been through. Her 4 arms went rigid with shock. Park Do-hyun's mouth fell open. Kim Yuna reached for a weapon that wasn't there. Han Taemin made a small squeaking sound and fell out of his chair. Hello, Captain, Ji-won said calmly. I think we need to talk about insurance fraud. 6 months later, Lee Ji-won stood in the greatest courtroom in the galaxy. The Galactic Trade Council's main chamber was enormous, with seats for representatives from hundreds of different worlds. Today, those seats were filled with beings from across known space, all watching the most important trial in recent history. At the defendants' table sat Captain Kang Mirai, Park Do-hyun, Kim Yuna, and Han Taman. They were no longer the confident, cruel aliens who had tried to murder him. Now they looked small and defeated, wearing the gray uniforms of galactic prisoners. The trial had been going on for weeks, and today was Jiwan's final testimony. His evidence had exposed not just one murder plot, but an entire network of alien crews who had been killing human engineers for profit. "Engineer Lee," said Judge Ko Min-soo, the neutral arbiter overseeing the trial, "please tell the court what happened in your own words." Jiwan looked out at the packed courtroom and began his story. He told them about the impossible repair job, the crew's betrayal and his escape. But more importantly, he told them about Oh-Sumin and the other human engineers who had died before him. "The defendants didn't see us as people," Jiwan said clearly. "They saw us as products. Human engineers were valuable because of our reputation for solving impossible problems. But we were even more valuable dead, because dead heroes pay better than living employees." In the gallery, he could see Admiral Bae Soo-jin and Captain Yu Jong-han, along with families of the murdered engineers. Oh-Sumin's parents were there, finally learning the truth about how their son had really died. His lawyer, Counselor Na Eunbi, was one of the best legal minds in human space. She had spent months building the case against the defendants, using Jiwan's evidence to expose the entire conspiracy. "The evidence shows," Counselor Na said to the court, "that this was not an isolated incident. The defendants have been systematically murdering human engineers for 5 years. They specifically chose humans because of stereotypes about our species." She activated a large display screen that showed financial records. The defendants collected over 40 million credits in insurance payments from the deaths of 4 human engineers. They had already taken out a policy on Engineer Lee worth 12 million credits. Captain Mirai tried to speak, but her lawyer quickly silenced her. There wasn't much they could say in defense. Jiwan's recordings of their conversations were clear evidence of their guilt. Park Do-hyun looked angry and defeated. During his own testimony, he had tried to claim that humans were naturally self-sacrificing, and that they were just giving the humans what they wanted. Though court had not been impressed by that argument, Kim Yuna had remained silent throughout most of the trial, but her personal logs had revealed her true feelings about humans. She had written detailed notes about the best ways to make human deaths look heroic for insurance purposes. Han Taman was the only one who had tried to cooperate with the investigation. He claimed he had been scared to speak up against the others, and had provided information about other crews involved in similar schemes. "Engineer Lee," Judge Ko said, "you escaped a situation that killed 4 other humans before you. What made the difference?" Jiwan thought carefully before answering. "The defendants made assumptions about humans based on our reputation. They thought we would always try to be heroes even when it was impossible. They didn't expect me to think for myself and find another solution. And what solution was that? I survived," Jiwan said simply. "Instead of dying to make them rich, I lived to tell the truth." The judge nodded. "The court has reviewed all evidence in this case. The defendants are found guilty of 4 counts of murder, conspiracy to commit fraud, and violations of interspecies labor law. The sentences were severe. Captain Mirai received life imprisonment on a prison planet. Park Do-hyun and Kim Yuna received 50 years each. Han Taman, because of his cooperation, received 20 years and agreed to testify against other crews involved in the conspiracy. But the trial had accomplished something more important than just punishing 4 criminals. Judge Ko announced new regulations that would protect human engineers throughout the galaxy. All contracts with human workers now required safety oversight by neutral inspectors. Insurance companies could no longer pay out claims for human deaths without independent investigation. Most importantly, any crew that lost a human engineer under suspicious circumstances would be automatically investigated by human authorities. After the sentencing, Jiwan walked outside the courthouse with Counselor Na and Admiral Bae. Reporters from across the galaxy were waiting to interview him, but he had already said everything he wanted to say. "What will you do now?" Admiral Bae asked. "I've accepted a position with the Galactic Safety Commission," Jiwan replied. "Chief Inspector of Interspecies Engineering Safety. My job will be to make sure this never happens to another human engineer." Counselor Na smiled. "That's perfect. Who better to protect human engineers than someone who survived what you survived?" As they walked away from the courthouse, Jiwan thought about Oh-Sumin and the other engineers who had died. Their deaths had not been meaningless after all. The trial had exposed the conspiracy and led to new laws that would protect future generations of human workers. A month later, Jiwon stood in a very different place. The Memorial Station for Lost Engineers was a small space platform orbiting Earth, dedicated to human engineers who had died in space. Oh Sumin's name was carved into a wall along with hundreds of others. Jiwon placed a small device next to Sumin's name. It was an improved emergency beacon that he had designed, small enough for any engineer to carry. If activated, it would send a signal directly to human authorities bypassing local alien command structures. The inscription on the device read, "For those who died fixing other people's problems." Humanity remembers. As he stood in the memorial hall, Jiwon reflected on everything that had changed. The galaxy had learned that humans were not easy victims to be exploited and discarded. They had learned that human engineers were not just talented problem solvers, but people who deserved respect and protection. Most importantly, they had learned that humans remember their dead, and they seek justice for those who cannot speak for themselves. His communication device beeped with a message from his new office, another case to investigate. A human engineer on a mining station who had died under suspicious circumstances. The crew claimed it was an accident, but the insurance payout was suspiciously large. Jiwon smiled and headed for his ship. He had work to do. The galaxy was learning that humans didn't just die heroically for others. They lived to make sure justice was done. They survived to tell the stories that needed to be told. They remembered the victims and punished the guilty. Captain Mirai had been wrong about one thing. Humans weren't good at dying for others. They were much better at living to protect each other. And now the galaxy knew it too. In his ship, as he prepared to investigate the next case, Jiwon looked out at the stars and made a promise to every human engineer working in the darkness between worlds. No one would die alone and forgotten again. Not on his watch.